So now we're just going to talk about our own experiences of feminism and why we consider ourselves to be intersectional feminists. And I'll start off, and clearly my reasoning is because to do with race. As a brown person, as you can see, and pretty clearly, maybe the only brown person in the room, that's okay. All right, so I was born here. My parents are from Peru, from South America. They came over in 1968, I think it was, as skilled migrants. And they came here because they wanted a better life for their children. They grew up in abject poverty in Peru, and were looking for a better life for their children like myself. So I wanted to declare the privilege that I believe that I have, firstly, and that's that I'm Western born, Western educated, cis female, middle class, brown Peruvian Australian woman. So for me, growing up in Australia, being born here but clearly not being Australian was a very strange experience. It was always the sensation of feeling that I didn't belong in some ways. So either I was too brown and I couldn't play the chasing game, or I wasn't Peruvian enough because I don't speak Spanish. So there was always that real kind of disaffection for me in relation to who I am and what I am and where I belong. I remember I always had the sensation of feeling that there was something wrong with me. There was, why wasn't I like everyone else? Why didn't I have the really nice white bread sandwiches at school? When I was 10, I distinctly remember being told that I couldn't play a particular game because I had brown skin, which were the words that were actually used. And I was really conscious of my difference to the point that I shaved my arm hairs when I was little because it was really disgusting and gross. Black hair and bushy and just gross. So that was always prevalent to me growing up in this country. So what I'm trying to do is just give you an outline of how I've come to where I am now, why I consider myself to be an intersectional feminist, and not just a feminist or a liberal feminist, I very have chosen to be an intersectional feminist over other types of feminism, and why that's important to me through my experiences. So I used to be a member of the Labor Party when I was about 16, I think. My Bruce is screwing up his face, didn't like that at all. Well, I was young, I was about 16. My mother and stepdad were very active in the Labor Party in Fairfield. My mother ran for Fairfield Council, until the ticket didn't get up. And I've always loved election day. I've always loved handing out powder votes. It's just the most fun in the whole world. I know it's super daggy, but that's what I like to do. So I blame my mum and stepdad for that. They gave me a sense of, thinking about things like injustice and social justice and poverty and class issues and that kind of thing. I resigned from the Labor Party when I was about 18, and I realised that they were really fucked. I swear a lot, by the way, as well, so just be prepared. I will be swearing a lot. I realised that they were really, really quite horrible and therefore left. I didn't go to uni after school. I was too interested in having lots of fun with my first boyfriend and taking lots of drugs. So I didn't go to uni. I don't have an academic understanding of feminism. I have my understanding of feminism. So it's a very emotive and personal understanding and acceptance of what feminism is. I think that's really important because particularly in the Greens, there's an assumption that people understand what you're talking about when you talk about first, second, third wave feminism and what that means for people, and then having discussions with other people, particularly who are people that I like to call dude bros, which are essentially white socialist males who like to pull you up in your feminism because it's identity politics and it doesn't align with whatever Marxist theory they're banging on about. I had to say it. So for me, intersectionality is something that I feel and that I experience. I also obviously connect with it on an intellectual level, but it's definitely it's a form of feminism that speaks to me in a way that I can't explain in a rational or logical way. It's just in my waters, so to speak. It's who I am. It's my experience as a feminist. So I had my beautiful daughter when I was very young, and that brought a lot of understanding for me about being a woman and raising a female child and what that was like, and that really brought a lot of issues to the forefront to me in relation to who I am and what I do. I went to uni as a mature age student and a single mother, and lasted, I think, a year, maybe 2 years, and didn't finish the degree. But when I was at uni, I've always been interested in politics, and I was always looking for somewhere to fit in, and it wasn't the Labor Party. It might have been the Democrats at one point. There's a little bit of flirtation there, but once the Workplace Relations Act was passed, that was it. I had nothing, I didn't want anything more to do with them. And I remember a friend of mine mentioning the Greens, and my first thought was, I don't think so, all they care about is trees. So I wasn't interested in the Greens at all. I had no time for the party as far as I was concerned, because they didn't speak for me. They didn't speak for the stuff that I cared about, which was women's rights or social justice issues, and that's what I thought at the time. And this is the late 90s, early 2000s. I was at uni listening to something, and a leaflet came around. Leaflets were being sent around. I was doing development studies at the time and doing women's studies. So I was really interested in the connection of those two subjects. And leaflets were being passed around, and it was from the Greens talking about the impact of neoliberal development policies on third world countries and women. And that literally blew my mind. I did not realise that the Greens had other issues besides environmental issues. And so that got my interest straight away. I was definitely a bit of a feral hippie at the time. And I went to the September 11, not the September 11, the S11 protests against the World Economic Forum in Melbourne with my daughter when she was about 2. And was on the picket line, not with my daughter, I was very responsible, but I was on the picket line. And I remember being impressed that Bob Brown was there. And to my mind, I thought that was amazing. He was a senator. He was taking time out from being a senator to be on a picket line to stop something as offensive as the World Economic Forum. And that was it for me. I joined the party. I was not active for a long time, and it wasn't until I went to the Greens Women's Group meeting that I became quite active. And then went to my first local group meeting and was pre-selected straight away. And that was it for me. My political career started. I ended up, I've been a member of the Greens for 15 years, and I've been very active in the party for 10. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I've been dealing with a lot of things in the party that I find extremely disappointing and heartbreaking in relation to racism. And that's just my thing. That's just what I do. It appears to be my role in the party. So joined the party, became active. I ran 5 elections in a row, became a local government councillor in Burwood, and very committed to the Greens and very committed to our message. There's just always a constant internal fight, essentially. I didn't discover intersectionality until I was on Twitter, actually, to be honest. Social media introduced me to intersectionality, and Twitter introduced me to feminists in other countries that were going through the same things that I was going through, that didn't feel that they belonged, they were being represented within mainstream feminism. I connected with some Latina feminists in America and was just blown away that they actually existed, because there aren't a lot of us in Australia. So that kind of got my interest. I started moderating for Destroy the Joint with my colleague Pearl, and that was really great initially. I did that for maybe 2 years. We moderated the Facebook page, and whilst it was really fun, particularly when we were being, when the Facebook page was being attacked by 4chan, that was always really fun. But it got to the point where I realised that that wasn't the place for me either, because a lot of the things that I was concerned about weren't being dealt with, and I was constantly having to fight the racism within Destroy the Joint as well. I had to fight to get posts not be so white saviourish, in the sense of, for example, rape in India. They wanted to put a post up in relation to stopping rape in India, and the whole post was centred around the fact that how horrible all Indian men are, essentially. So it was, I had to do a bit of work on that and just say, let's it's not so fantastic here. We need to not be hypocrites. And how about we talk about assisting the groups that are working towards ending India, rather than us saying we've got the solution. So that really solidified a lot of stuff for me about why I do not like liberal feminism and mainstream feminism so much, and why it doesn't speak for me. So I'm just going through my notes. So I wrote a lot of notes. I'm not going to use all of them because you'll just be bored. My concern with mainstream feminism, which I equate to liberal feminism, is that it talks about the equality of women, but keeping in place the structures that we have, so the capitalist structures that we have that don't necessarily allow for equality of other women. So that's why I get frustrated when I hear mainstream or liberal, essentially white feminists, talking about the issues that they're concerned about, that they think are the most important issues for women, such as putting women on the boards of companies or not shaving their body hair. So for me, that's extremely offensive. Fantastic, you want equality for women and you want women on boards, but let's have a look. Why don't we talk about those boards of the companies that you want women on? How is having a woman on board of a company, how is that good for womankind? What about the workers that are employed for the companies? What about the kind of work that those companies are doing? What about the destruction that they're affording there? How is that a good thing for feminism? And I really want to touch on the body hair issue because it's really, it's quite interesting when you see things like the body hair issue and how some feminists are talking about how we need to really embrace our natural state of being, way of being, and let's grow our underarm hairs, let's not pluck our eyebrows, let's do this. What they're not taking into concern is the fact of, no ethnic woman ever has said to themselves, yeah, shit, I better grow my body hair because, I shaved my arms when I was 10 because of my body hair. I like plucking my eyebrows and waxing my moustache, because I have one, because it's just what happens. Wanting to talk about the issue of race and the impact that it has, and my experience of it in the Greens in particular. As an intersectional feminist, I find it really offensive that progressive people and progressive feminists consider that it's okay to be racist when talking about population, when talking about overpopulation in particular. And it's really prevalent in the party, and it's really disappointing and heartbreaking. It's not okay to be in favour of the conservation of our environment to the detriment of people, to the point where we're saying, or people are pushing in the party, that we need to stop skilled migrants coming into the country, or that we stop immigration, and in order to save the environment. I understand, I'm not saying that that's not a valid concern in relation to the environment, and I understand, I do agree with the impact of climate change and that we do need to do something about it. I find it really offensive when people think it's okay that the solution to that problem is to stop migrants coming to the country, because that will stop overpopulation. As a brown breeding woman, I find that extremely offensive. I have 3 children. I breed, that's what I do. That's what I've done, I should say, I'm not doing it anymore. But what it also does is that it posits the idea that, or the notion that the solution to the upcoming climate catastrophe and the impact it's going to have on our environment is to stop people breeding or to stop migrants coming to the country. What it's not doing is looking at our own consumption levels and our own culpability and how we're contributing to that issue, and not just Australia. Western world, to be honest. It's very nationalistic as well. It's really offensive. We need to look beyond our own borders. I'm an open borders person myself, so if we had no borders, then we wouldn't have these problems. But that's another story. So, as a member of the Greens, because I've been around for so long, I didn't realise that there was that underlying racism in the party. I remember being quite surprised when it first happened. How much time do I have? And my first experience with it was around, I think it was about 2009, 2010, when Bob Brown ended up speaking about, made some public comments with Dick Smith in relation to stopping skilled migrants coming to Australia as a solution to our overpopulation issue. That wasn't Green's policy at the time, it's not Green's policy now. And he did that without consultation. And myself and a few others in the party organised in New South Wales and nationally to stop that becoming our policy. And that's probably one of my proudest moments in the party, to be honest. And I'm still working towards that not becoming our policy. But it's a debate that still rages, and it's problematic for the reasons that I spoke about, where we're not recognising our own culpability, and it sets up the dichotomy. The argument that's being used nowadays in relation to population is not just they're stopping school migrations or stopping immigration, but it's essentially what's being said these days is we'll increase our intake of refugees, but we'll decrease our intake of skilled migrants. And that's problematic for a lot of reasons. Why that's problematic is because whilst it might seem like a good solution because we're still being good to brown people, what it does is it sets up a dichotomy of bad migrants and good migrants. So we'll accept these kind because, you know, they're good migrants, they're refugees, they're in fear of their life. We won't accept these ones because they're economic migrants or they're skilled migrants, so therefore they're bad. What that does is it doesn't take into account the people who are trying to better their life, who are skilled migrants. Just because someone is a skilled migrant or an economic migrant doesn't mean that they're necessarily rich from another country. It just means that they've got an education. So for instance, in places like Peru, where I come from, where my family comes from, university education is free. Everyone has a degree. Everyone, in fact, has, like, my family, they have 2 or 3 degrees, all my cousins and my hundreds and thousands of cousins and aunties and uncles. So it's not difficult to get an education in Peru in particular. And I get quite frustrated with the whole good migrant, bad migrant dichotomy. It's not the solution to the issue, and it's still racist. We need to accept that as people in a progressive party in this country, it doesn't automatically make us not racist. Just because you're a Greens member or you're on the left or you're progressive doesn't mean you're not racist or that you can't be racist. So that's fine. Let's just have a look at how we do things. Let's have a look at the way we discuss things. Let's have a look at our own privilege. I have privilege as a Peruvian woman here in Australia, and I think we all need to look at that and accept that, which is why intersectionality works for me. It talks about the different ways of being feminist, and for me it's about being bisexual, being South American, and being feminist, and that's why intersectionality works for me.